We are back on Morning Line. Thanks for joining us. Our guest this morning, Chris Johnson with Takacs and McGinnis Elder Law. It's good to have him on as always. And Chris, you know, we were talking about the power of attorney, and you can explain again what that is, but we had a story the U.S. Attorney sent out last week that really caught my attention, where they arrested an individual. You may have seen it. It was in the news. They arrested a guy who actually went to this elderly woman's home, and he was doing pest control for her, and they became friends. They started knowing each other. This woman may be having some deficit, eventually slowing down. I don't know if she had family or friends around her, but he convinced her to sign over power of attorney. And over a period of more than a year, he took from her, slowly but surely, more than $1 million. And has now been caught and charged, but it's just heartbreaking. At one point, he led her to believe that he was her long-lost stepson, and she signed it over. And you know, that can be the danger of power of attorney, and maybe you can talk a bit about what it does and how important it is that you decide who it is that gets that power, because how it can be abused.
Oh, absolutely, Nick. And we saw that story, obviously, in our realm. A story like that goes through like wildfire.
Yeah, that was awful.
A despicable act, obviously. What apparently occurred, allegedly, is that she did have some type of mental deficit, and he did convince her that he was someone that he was not, that he was some long-lost family member, and convinced her to provide power of attorney. And what that power of attorney authority does is it gives you legal and financial access. And I don't want to say control. Now, in that case, it did give him control because she didn't have the ability to push back. But the way I describe it to people is when we turn 18, when we're full-fledged adults, we have certain legal rights. We can own property, we can sign contracts, we can own a home, all these legal and financial things we can do. And so when you give someone power of attorney, it's kind of like when you're on Microsoft Word and you're copying and pasting text. What you're doing is you're highlighting all your legal rights, and then you're hitting that right click on the mouse, you're hitting the copy function, and then you're pasting it on another individual. So that means that person steps into the shoes for your rights and can act on your behalf. But there's a few critical aspects that come along with a power of attorney. The most important is it is a fiduciary position, and that means that individual must do what's in the primary's best interest. In this case, obviously, that fiduciary duty was breached, and breached terribly. That is really one of the more awful things, to take advantage of someone in that position and then to essentially embezzle $1 million. It's unconscionable, and it's unbelievable that it happened. And thankfully, the legal system has its hands on it now, and they will get their due process in court, and hopefully a just result will come out of that. But those powers of attorney, what you were talking about, Nick, is it is very important that you choose very wisely who you provide that authority to, because you are handing over a great deal of authority for someone to act on your behalf, and you need to trust that person implicitly. I have a phrase that I use with clients when they're kind of deciding, especially when they're hung up on an individual. I'll tell someone, when in doubt, leave them out. If there is any hesitation to put them in that role, they don't belong in that role, because you need to have someone that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt is going to do the right thing, because oftentimes they're going to be acting when no one's looking. And so that is critically important. And then you'll hear something called a springing power of attorney, and that's power of attorney authority that doesn't come to pass until you lose capacities. So basically, Nick, if I made you my springing power of attorney, as long as I had capacity, as I had all my faculties together, you're not my agent. But as soon as I cannot act on my own behalf, then you become my agent. And a lot of people feel like, oh, that's a good alternative, that'll protect myself. But the problem is it gives them a false sense of security, because if you can't trust that person when you can keep an eye on them, how can you trust that person when you can't keep an eye on them? And so you want to have someone that can take it from day one, because mechanically getting a springing power of attorney in force is a little bit more difficult and can prove cumbersome when it's most needed. And so you just need to make sure the individuals you are choosing are beyond a shadow of a doubt going to do what's in your best interest no matter what.
And you know, that phrase, I never heard that phrase of the power of attorney. What'd you call the spring power of attorney?
Springing power of
Springing
attorney.
power.
So
Okay.
you
How is
have
that? How is that different than a conservatorship? Because I just figure most power of attorneys, like I have that for both of my folks, and as I've said, they have some deficit and they need assistance, but they're still pretty darn functional. And so, I mean, my dad can still spend money and he can still access his bank account, but we're there to assist them, and if he needs help, we can do that. So how is what you said that different than a conservatorship?
Yeah, so we'll go back to that Microsoft Word example that I like to use. The power of attorney is the copying and pasting of your rights and putting them on another individual so they can assist you, they can help you. And that's what your parents have done with you. They've given you authority to act on their behalf, and you're able to do a lot of things for them, and that improve their lives and make it better, and it's convenient for everyone. In a conservatorship, you're still highlighting their rights, and you're still hitting the right click on the mouse, but instead of hitting copy and paste, you're hitting cut and paste, and you're truly stripping that individual of their rights. And for that, you need to go through the court process. There is going to be a great deal of judicial oversight, and the court is going to look for the least impactful means to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish. And so if they can do it by lesser means than a full-blown conservatorship, they will want to do that, because we're America, we're very pro-individual rights, and the idea of truly taking someone's individual rights away is a very high bar. The courts hold a very high threshold in order to get that done. And so you're really getting to that point where someone is harming themselves either financially, mentally, physically, and can truly no longer make good decisions to protect themselves. And that's when you're running into that realm.
Okay, that's a great way to describe it, and I'm with you. That should be the very last resort, and that's something I never want to have to deal with in that. But the key word that you used, and a lot of people, it's a big word, maybe not everyone understands what it means, but fiduciary is meaning that you have that power, and it is not for you to enrich yourself, or it's for you to take a little money out so you can go have lunch or something stupid like that. It is you are in a position to spend and help them. That is, you're in a position to do the best for them. Have you come across situations sometimes, not quite like this one with the U.S. Attorney we just talked about, but where there have been family members where you maybe legitimately have some concern, worried, because when they come to you, you're still looking out first and foremost for the elderly person they're trying to help, where you wonder maybe sometimes, is this family's heart in the right place?
Absolutely. You will run into that on occasion. We love it when it's kind of the big happy family scenario where the parents come in with the children and we're sitting around the table and we're really working it out together. But make no mistake, our client is the person we're looking out for, and that is the senior, that is the elderly person. And so it doesn't matter who brought them in or how they got there. I'm only looking out for the person right in front of me, and that's my client, and I want what's very best for them. If I have pause or hesitation, I will talk to them about it. I will kick everyone out of the room and have a conversation with just that individual. I will give them my misgivings. I have passed on representation because I think this doesn't smell right, and you need to do that. You need to hold that firm line. At the end of the day, you want everyone taken care of to the best of their ability. You also, unfortunately, you have the realities in the world that not everyone has those trusted people in their lives. You know, your parents are very lucky, Nick, that they have you. I'm glad that my parents have me and my siblings, and I know they've got a bunch of kids that are looking out for them. But not every family situation is like that, is that happy. Some people don't have children. Some people have children that just things haven't worked out that well. And that really puts them in the horns of the dilemma. Now, there are people that will serve in those roles as professionals. You can hire someone to serve as a power of attorney. You can hire someone to serve as your trustee. But it is difficult to find.
One other quick point on power of attorney. We talked mostly about financial here. If you could just touch bases on the fact there's also medical power of attorney. And does it usually behoove someone to get both at the same time? I originally just got financial for my family, but then I realized, I need medical as well. And so I've doubled it up. So now I have both. And maybe you can explain why medical is something that can come in handy and how that's obviously different from financial POW, or POA rather.
Yes. So the healthcare power of attorney is medical decision making, and absolutely I would always encourage people to get both. There's just no reason not to. You want to have that, especially for a parent who's older, and we're all going to run into chronic medical conditions at some point. You want to make sure that in that emergent situation there's no hesitation. You have that authority, and decision making is seamlessly transitioned to your power of attorney. And then it behooves the principal to make sure their agent knows their wishes. Remember, our wishes are the same as our values, and our wishes are just the manifestations of what our values are. If you don't communicate that to your agent, then you're not making sure that your wishes are going to be honored. Yes, they have the legal authority, but are they going to follow through with what you want? And so that medical decision making is a critical piece of the overall planning. Yes, the financial legal is very important, and a lot of people can focus on that, but you want that healthcare side as well, because when that healthcare becomes the primary issue, that'll be the only thing that matters until that emergent situation is over.
Boy, yeah, you're no kidding. I thought about that. We haven't had to use it yet, but it comes in handy, especially when you have to make split-second decisions that could be life and death. And you can make them if your loved one can't. Let's take a call before we go to the break from Pat. Pat, good morning. Hi, Pat.
Yes, sir. I got a granddaughter. She's my attorney on my medical, but she not over my other stuff. I pay my own bills and everything, but she over my medical. She makes sure I get to the doctor and stuff like that. I really don't think I need a power attorney over my, my other stuff.
Yeah,
but I do have over.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I do have over my medical.
Okay, that's great. And you're able to take care of your bills and keep your bank and checking account in order on your own, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, that's fine. So maybe, yeah, she's listening to us talk and hearing us talk about the financial. It sounds to me like she has it set up where it is right now. What do you recommend, or at what point maybe would she decide, or should she decide that maybe she could bring this woman in if she trusts her to take the financial as well as the medical?
Well, Nick, you've just asked the million-dollar question. That's what everyone wants to know. When do I do this? And the problem is, if you wait until you need it, you've waited too long. And so there's never really too early a time to do it. Just because you give someone the authority, it doesn't mean they have to act on it. So, Pat, in your case, if you give this trusted individual durable general power of attorney, you can keep paying your bills. You can keep staying in charge of everything. You just have them to assist you if you ever need it down the road. And because tomorrow's never promised, and we don't know what it's going to bring, we need to make sure that that authority is ready to go. So my recommendation is, so long as you trust them and trust them implicitly and feel like they will do right by you, I would make sure they have that authority. And then there's a couple of things you could do to protect yourself. One, you could let her know where the power of attorney document is and say, hey, you can come retrieve it if something happens to me. So the authority's there, but I'm just not ready to hand you the document. That's one thing that you could do. Another thing, you could just say, I'm providing you the document, but I don't need anything, as long as you trust that she's not going to take any actions. Remember, when you give this authority, she has a fiduciary obligation to only do what's in your best interest. And you heard Nick kind of explain that. It's vitally critical for them to know they can only do what's good for you. When they're doing something that enriches themselves, they are violating the law, and they will be held accountable.
And by the way, we should just say that getting power of attorney, be it medical or financial, right, Chris, is not a very expensive, big, huge undertaking. You basically get the documents, both sides sign it. I think you have to have a notary on it. You have an original, you make copies. That process is not something that's overwhelming for anyone. It can be done pretty easily, I guess.
Yeah, very simple process and not an expensive process, and a good thing to have. And the headaches, so we talked about that conservatorship. If you don't have a power of attorney and you lose capacity, the only option for your family at that point is going to be a conservatorship. Now, a conservatorship is a very time-consuming and expensive process, but because it goes through the court system, and rightfully so, we want to make sure that the microscope is on each and every one of those situations. But if you don't need to go through that, it's good to avoid it.
Great advice. Listen, we'll go to the break, and as we do, just to Pat and others then. Pat, I was in the same situation with you with my folks. I just had the opposite, actually. I had power of attorney financial, and I added medical, even though they didn't really need it at that point, just in case, and I haven't had to use it. You might want to do the same thing, so it's there, like you heard Chris say, when you need it. We'll take a break. When we come back, more phone calls, more of our conversation with Chris. He's just terrific. Elder law right after this. Stay with us.